Hello dear students, in this lecture we will discuss about the electrical activity of the auditory system. In last lecture we have studied about the auditory system and we have seen how the hearing occurs in our ear, or we can say the auditory system. So today we will discuss more about the electrical activity of the auditory system. So first, let's get introduced by the term sound. What we mean by sound? Basically, sound are the vibrations that travel through the air, or we can say another medium, and it can be heard when they reach our ear. It is a longitudinal pressure wave. Vibrations in sound, because they are longitudinal waves, so they will cause compressions and rarefactions. So you can see the compression and rarefactions. So C is for compression and R is for rarefaction, and you can see this longitudinal wave, or we can say pressure wave with respect to time. It is showing compression and rarefaction. Now, what are the other characteristics of the wave? So we have basic characteristics which almost all the waves are having, so that are amplitude, frequency and wavelength. So you can see in this figure we have amplitude, which is nothing but the maximum value that the signal can reach. We have frequency, which is nothing but 1 by time period. In time period is the cycle of one complete, or we can say duration of one complete cycle. So that is, you can see time period, and frequency is nothing but 1 by time period. And then we have another characteristic, that is wavelength. Now these three properties have particular names with reference to sound. Amplitude related to loudness, or we can say volume of the sound. If we want to increase or decrease, that means we are increasing or decreasing the amplitude of the wave. So that will increase or decrease the loudness, or we can say volume of the sound wave. So if I am telling it is quieter, means it will have less amplitude, and if I am telling it is louder, that means it will have more magnitude or amplitude. Then frequency is related to pitch. You can see the lower pitch and the higher pitch. So basically it is, if it is having less frequency, we will say lower pitch. Less frequency means more time period of a cycle, and if I am saying higher pitch, that means less time period and more frequency, higher is the pitch. So these are the main terms which are related to the sound wave. And we know human normal hearing level of the frequency, mainly the frequency range of a normal hearing level is 20 Hertz to 20,000 Hertz. Our ear can bear up to the frequencies. Now, already we have seen little bit about, we have studied about the path of sound, or we can say the purpose or the path of hearing, how the sound waves are traveling into the ear, what are the basic parts of the ear that it has to undergo. So a little bit again we will revise this thing before going further. So sound waves enter through the pinna that we have seen. So you can see this pinna. The sound waves enter through the pinna. Then they pass along the canal, that is auditory canal, or we can say ear canal. It will reach up to the eardrum, that is basically outer ear, if you remember. So it is having pinna, then we have auditory or ear canal, and we have eardrum. Then they bounce off the eardrum, making it vibrate. So in that case, when the signal or sound reaches to eardrum, it will vibrate. The vibrations pass along the inner ear. Now we will have the inner ear, and we know that inner ear have three bones, and we are calling it as, in combination of three, we are calling it as ossicles. Then the stapes means the third of these bones. If you remember, we have three bones, and the third of these bones, that is stapes, presses against the oval window in the cochlea. That will press against the oval window in the cochlea, and here they shake thousands of tiny hairs that stick into the fluid from hair cells, because we know that middle layer basically, which is having three bones, it is having a air filled cavity, and then we have liquid, or we can say fluid, into the inner ear. So the basilar membrane, we have this basilar membrane, you can see, and the hair cells of the cochlea function as a sharply tuned frequency analyzer. So it is functioning as a sharply tuned frequency analyzer, and sounds of different frequencies vibrate different parts of the basilar membrane, and the point of maximal vibration amplitude depends on the sound frequency. So the point of maximal vibration amplitude will depend on the sound frequency. As the hair vibrates, these hair cells generate the nerve signals, or we can say neural signals, and these nerve signals travel along the auditory nerve. You can see this auditory nerve. So the nerve signals travel along the auditory nerve to the hearing center of the brain, that is mainly in the temporal lobe or brain stem, you can say. So that is the hearing center of the brain. Now let's discuss about the generation of cochlear potential, how the potential is generated in the cochlea. So as the basilar membrane vibrates, we have seen the hair cells which are attached to this membrane are rhythmically pushed up against the tectorial membrane, bending the hair cell stereocilia. And what happens then? This will open mechanically gated ion channels. We know about the gated ion channels. We have studied in neuron chapter. So it will open mechanically gated ion channel on the hair cell, which allow influx of potassium and calcium ions. And the flow of ions, it will generate an alternating, we can say, AC current through the hair cell surface at the same frequency as the acoustic stimulus. So it will generate that AC current at the same frequency depending upon the stimulus. And this measurable AC voltage is called the cochlear microphonic, and it is abbreviated as CM, which mimics the stimulus. So depending upon the stimulus, that it will generate a signal of same frequency depending upon the stimulus, and that measurable AC voltage is known as cochlear microphonic. Now the hair cell will function as a transducer, because up till now we had the mechanical movement, or we can say vibrations. Now the hair cells will function as a transducer, and they convert mechanical movement of the basilar membrane into the electrical voltage in a process. We call it as, it is a process, and it will release or require some energy, and that process requiring is adenosine triphosphate. We know that is an energy source from the steria vascularis velis. So it will take that energy from adenosine triphosphate to convert that mechanical movement of the basilar membrane into the electrical voltage. Now the depolarized hair cell releases, we know, neurotransmitters, and we know what are neurotransmitters and where do they get released. So the depolarized hair cell release neurotransmitters across a synapse to primary auditory neurons of the spiral ganglion. Now, upon reaching the receptors on the postsynaptic spiral ganglion neurons, the neurotransmitters induce a postsynaptic potential, or we can say generator potential in the neuronal projections. When a certain threshold potential is reached, we know if it reaches a certain threshold potential, what will happen? The spiral ganglion neuron fires an action potential, that is similar what we have studied in neuron chapter. These are again spiral ganglion neurons. So if it reaches a particular threshold, then it will fire an action potential which enters the auditory processing pathway of the brain. So then it will enter the auditory processing pathway of the brain. Now let's discuss the various electrical events occurring in the cochlea. So we know that electricity is nothing but hearing language for the brain. The displacement of hair cells produces responses within these cells which cause a transmitter release, that is mainly neurotransmitter, from the base of the hair cell. This transmitter release ultimately what it will do, it will generate electrical nerve impulses into the fibers of the eighth nerve. This also we have studied in the last lecture about the eighth nerve. Now, a positive electrical potential has been found within the endolymph fluid of the cochlear duct. So, it will have a positive electrical potential, and the inside composition of the outer hair cells have been found to have a negative electrical potential. So we have both, one side we have positive, other side we have negative. So this electrical difference potential between the inner structure of the outer hair cells, which is normally negative, and the endolymph fluid, which is positive, is large. So this is having large difference, and a resting, we can say a resting endolymphatic potential of a normal cochlea is around plus 80 millivolt. We are keeping with respect to outside, we can say endolymph fluid, if you keep positive, so it is how much positive? It is 80 millivolt more positive with respect to the inner side. So when an acoustic stimulus is delivered to the cochlea, what will happen to this positive negative balance? It is getting disturbed. So this electrical positive negative balance is disturbed, and when this disturbance occurs, what will happen? Two responses within the cochlea become apparent. Now what are those two responses? So the two responses are, first is the frequency of the acoustic stimulus is reproduced by the cochlea, so it will reproduce the frequency, and a sizable shift from the baseline resting potential is produced, which was normally plus 80 millivolt. Now it will shift basically, and we call it as a summating electrical potential. Now, when both of these potentials, mainly the frequency and electrical potential, reach a maximum best frequency, we can say, which correspond to the maximum displacement peak of the traveling wave, the acoustic stimulus will transform into an electrical stimulus for the eighth nerve. So this is how that electrical event originates in the cochlea. Now, what are the main different forms of potentials in the cochlea? Just once we'll go again to that. So there are three potentials generated upon cochlear stimulation, and these are cochlear microphonic, that we have seen, somatic potential that just now we have discussed, and the one we have action potential. So there are basically three different kinds of potentials which are generated upon the cochlear stimulation. So just in brief, again we will see what are those. The cochlear microphonic is an alternating current. We have seen AC voltage that mirrors the waveform of the acoustic stimulus. Means it will depend upon the acoustic stimulus, and it will have the same frequency depending upon the acoustic stimulus. And it is dominated by the outer hair cells of the organ of Coti. The magnitude of the recording is dependent on the proximity of the recording electrodes to the hair cells. And this cochlear microphonic potential, or we can say AC current or AC voltage, is proportional to the displacement of the basilar membrane. So it is proportional to the displacement of the basilar membrane, this cochlear microphonic potential. Then we have the summating potential. It is first described by Desakai et al. In 1954, and it is the direct current DC response of the hair cells as they move in conjunction with the basilar membrane. Basically, it is like baseline drifting. So that is DC current response of the hair cells, and they move in conjunction with the basilar membrane, and it is the stimulus related potential of the cochlea. Next is your the auditory nerve action potential, and we have seen when it crosses the threshold, basically it produces the action potential, and it is the most widely studied component in electrocochleography, that is the signal associated with our ear, and it is abbreviated as capital EC, then we have OCH and capital G, so that is electrocochleograph. This action potential represents the summed response of the synchronous firing of the nerve fibers. When basically so many neurons are fired and they fired in synchronous, so they will cross a particular threshold and it will produce a action potential. So it is summed response of the synchronous firing of the nerve fibers. It also appears as an AC voltage. So we have two basically different kinds of AC voltage or AC potential, and one is your DC potential. Now we have different kinds of waves that we will take in our next lecture, but still we have 5 or 6, 7 waves in this response. So the first and the largest wave, that is N1, is identical to wave 1 of the auditory brainstem response, and following this is N2, which is identical to wave 2nd of the ABR. We will discuss these waves in next lecture. And the magnitude of the action potential reflects the number of fibers that are firing. That also we will discuss. And the latency of the action potential is measured as the time between the onset and the peak of the N1 wave, or we can say the wave 1. Now let's get into brief of electrocochleography. So it is a technique of recording electrical potentials generated in the inner ear and auditory nerve in response to sound stimulus, using an electrode placed in the ear canal or tympanic membrane. We know that ear canal or auditory canal or tympanic membrane, these are the same thing. The test is performed by an otologist, or we can say audiologist, with specialized training, and is used for detection of elevated inner ear pressure or for the testing and monitoring of inner ear and auditory nerve function. So what is the procedure to calculate this signal, or to get this signal, or to record this signal? So it can be performed with either we know invasive or non-invasive type of electrodes. If we talk about invasive electrodes such as trans-tympanic, that is TT needles, give clearer, more robust electrical responses with larger magnitudes, since the electrodes are very close to the voltage generators. The needle is placed on the promontory wall of the middle ear and the round window. Non-invasive, if I talk about, these electrodes have the advantage of not causing any pain or discomfort to the patient. So every time mostly we are trying for non-invasive type of experiments. Auditory stimuli in the form of broadband clicks that are 100 microseconds in duration are used. The stimulus polarity can be rarefaction polarity, condensation polarity, or alternating polarity. So this can have different types of polarity. signals are recorded from a primary recording electrode located in the ear canal or tympanic membrane or promontory depending on the type of electrode used. The reference, or we can say inverting electrodes, can be placed on the contralateral earlobe, mastoid or ear canal. The signal is further processed, including signal amplification, by as much as a factor of we can say 1 lakh for extra tympanic electrode recordings, noise filtration and signal everything. So these are the after getting signal, we can process this signal, we can amplify, we can filter, and finally we can average a signal, because generally the amplitude is very less. So we need signal averaging. Also, we are using for this a band pass filter from 10 Hz to 1.5 kHz, which is often used. Now, how we interpret the signals? The CM, that is your AC potential, SP is again DC potential, and action potential, are all used in the diagnosis of endolymphatic hydrops and Meniere's disease. So it is a disorder of the inner ear that can lead to disease spells and hearing loss. In particular, abnormally high SP and a high SP by AP ratio are signs of Meniere's disease. And if we can say the ratio SP by AP ratio of 0.45 or greater is considered as abnormal. So this is all in this lecture, and again these are some references. So thank you so much.